This is the Behavioral View. I'm Shannon Hill, and joining me is Nissa Van Etten. We're your hosts for candid conversations about applied behavior analysis. No gimmicks, just real talk, practical tips, and maybe a few laughs. Come on and join us. Let's have some fun. Hey everyone, would you like to get at CEU for this episode? Listen closely for the announcement of 3 secret words delivered throughout the episode. Take note of those words, and we'll tell you where to go to get your CEU when the show is over. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Behavioral View. My name is Shannon Hill. I am the editor-in-chief at CentralReach Institute. I'm here with some great friends from CentralReach today, which I will let them introduce themselves one at a time. But we're here to talk about parent training and specifically to handle FAQs about parent training that have come to us from various sources, some of them from viewers of the Behavioral View. So before we kick into all of that, let me just let everybody introduce themselves. Nissa, you're up first.
Hey everyone, Nissa Van Etten, and I'm the Director of Clinical Training and CR Institute here at CentralReach.
And then we have as our third revolving panel member today, Allison. Say hi, Allison.
I'm Allison Walker. I am an instructional designer in the customer education department for CentralReach.
And then as our guest in the hot seat today, we have another CentralReach internal BCBA, Kristen. You want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Kristen Smith, and I'm a content creator, and my primary focus right now is our parent training curriculum and content at CentralReach.
And that is why you are in the hot seat today. Although the rest of us will chime in and try to help and not make it all about, hey, Kristen, here's the spotlight on you. Answer all of our questions. And honestly, we have way more questions than we will get to today. So we're just going to start going through them and just taking what we can get and get into a good conversation. I'd rather give some in-depth responding to a few than just surface level responding to all of them. So we will just see where this goes. But before we begin with all of that, we have our usual question of the day, which this time is, what's your best self-care tip that does not include food, drink, or travel? So we're not looking for the big stuff this time. How do you take care of yourself on a day-to-day basis was the intention when I wrote that. But if you interpreted it some other way, that's fine too.
Okay. I know Nissa's going to love my answer, so I feel like this is good. I feel as though lately I've tried to be very intentional with my self-care, trying to make it functionally match whatever is either I'm predicting will result in me needing it, or with just like what is generally making me feel good. So right now I'd say my go-to self-care is working out. Like Nissa and I were talking the other day and I was like, gosh, I'm getting so tired in the afternoon. I need like a 10-minute workout to just like boost my energy. So those are kind of my 2 go-tos right now.
Do you approve, Nissa?
I do. And actually, I'll just jump off, and that's my self-care is just I work out in the morning and then in the evening. Sometimes the morning is just a light jog. And when I say jog, anyone that knows me knows I am not a fast runner. It's just trying to get my heart rate up, get outside. And then the end of the day, it's typically CrossFit or weightlifting. It allows me that time to just not think, right? Your body's just moving and you're not thinking about all the things we do as analysts and parents as well.
Yeah.
So mine, anytime I think of self-care, there is a quotation from an article by Brianna Weiss that I always kind of come back to. Maybe a little bit of a different take, but the perspective is that true self-care is not bath salts and chocolate cake. It's making the choice to build a life that you don't need to regularly escape. So the idea is that true self-care isn't, oh, I need to escape from my life. I'm going to take a bubble bath. I need to escape. I'm going to do this or that. Really, truly caring for yourself is doing sometimes the ugly, gross things that we don't want to do so that we build a life that we don't need to escape from, so that we can enjoy things in our life without having to frame it as, oh, well, I deserve this as an escape from this other stuff. So really just focusing on responsibly living your life and choosing the things that are meaningful and important to you is really the best self-care that you can give yourself.
Oh gosh, I do love that. I really do.
Yeah.
And I could go both ways on this. I can talk about a lot of different things because the older I get, the more important self-care is to me. So I think the thing I will throw out there, I'll get a little bit woo-woo on it. Boundaries. Boundaries, because when I feel like I need the most self-care, it is because I've crossed them or I've let somebody else cross them. And um, so, and especially for behavior analysts, right? We're known for workaholism and that we're going to push into this and push into that. And um, I can't say I'm perfect. There are definitely some days that I'm having 14, 16-hour work days. But for the most part, um, whenever I start, there's internal messaging that going on inside my body that says too much. Either you've been sitting at the computer too long, or you've been dealing with this frustrating situation too long, or you've been trying to make something work that is obviously not going to work for too long, whatever it is. And then to respect that. And like you're saying, Allison, sometimes that's enough. Just right there, me noticing that and then getting up and doing something that is going to be important to me. Maybe it's cook a meal. Maybe it's walk the dog. Maybe it is lay on the couch and watch The Office. I don't know.
Good one.
Yeah.
I do also
listening.
love a good facial. I'm not saying that I don't have any. That would
Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely. All right. Well, are you guys ready to get into these questions, frequently asked questions?
Let's do it.
I am really excited for some of these. These are some great things. So I guess we can kick off with one of the most common, and it is so simple and so difficult at the same time. Basically, how do we get parents to be there? How do we get them to, I'm categorizing, how do I get parents to buy in? How do I get them to not cancel? How do I get them to be present for this parent training session / program? What do you guys have to offer on that?
Well, Allison, I would love for you to go because you and I, we've had presented many times about this, and I know that your answer is going to set the stage for pretty much the rest of our discussion today. So why don't you go first?
Yeah, so I think we can look at it through the same lens that we look through all of our behavior analytic work, right? If we are struggling to have parents attend, buy in, then what we're doing is not reinforcing. There's a lot of different reasons that we can look at what isn't reinforcing, or maybe what's aversive. What kind of setting events do we have that we're walking into? I think all of those components we think of all the time when we're looking at our client's behavior. But the family is an extension of that client when we're doing family training. And if what we're doing isn't helpful, reinforcing, if it feels bad to them, if they feel judged, like all of those things are going to make it not reinforcing. I can't tell you how many times that I've had, some kind of behavior planning with a family and just like prayed to myself, please, let some of this work so that so it's reinforcing, right? So they will trust me so that we can continue to work through this and work on it in the future. And I think parent training is very unique in a way because I think I might have mentioned this in another behavioral view parent training. But when we're training technicians, right, they're coming in with kind of a clean slate. Maybe they have some experience, but it's not personal experience, right? Even if they know somebody, when we're coming in and teaching parents things about behavior analysis, things about behavior, things about reinforcement, they have a history of maybe not doing those things correctly for the very specific child that we're there to see. And that's an emotional history for them to now they're learning all of these things and they're thinking, well, for 7 years, I've been making this worse. So they have not only all of this stuff to learn, but they have, kind of the setting events of a history, and they're learning and hearing these things. And it very easily can feel like, oh, I am wrong. I've been doing this wrong. I'm bad. My behavior is bad. I think it can very easily feel that way, even with the best of intentions and the best approach. It is just it's a challenging thing because parenting is such a personal experience.
Yeah, I agree. I think being a parent is a very vulnerable thing to be. Like, no one sets out to say, I can't wait to see areas where I know I should do better, and I just don't have the bandwidth, or I've chosen to let that ball drop because I'm juggling 20 other balls, right? So I agree. I also think one of the ways that I've really changed my practice over the years is I live just acknowledging that parent or family is the expert on their family. And my job is not to come in and tell them how things should look or how things could look. It's to sit down with them and say, like, hey, we are 50-50 partners in that. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to give you the tools, and then I'm going to empower you and teach you how to build the life you want. So eventually, on our last day when I come, I realize you don't need me anymore. Any situation that comes up, even if you're stressed or if your child still has, tantrums or meltdowns, you feel confident in managing it. And I think that, that kind of ties into being reinforcing, but also it's really giving parents the power and autonomy to build what works for them. And that may look differently. Maybe their house is messy, and it's always going to be messy. And that's okay. That's not the thing I need to address, right? But really letting them kind of guide what's valuable to them and how that's built over time, so that, in the old days, I would just show up and I'm like, here's your data sheet. Here's the system I built. Like, it failed every time. And I think a lot of that's why. It's because, show up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and tell them what to do. And that, as a parent, that's not what I want someone to do. I mean, maybe sometimes, but like at the end of the day, that's not what I want in the interaction that I want.
I couldn't agree more. I think both points. I think that there's a lot of that finding the low-hanging fruit, right? And I've said this since I started in the field. Sometimes the work that we do doesn't look like work. And great example is my sister's here with her babies and really needed help with trying to manage her almost 2-year-old. And she was like, it doesn't look like you're even working with her, but she's listening to everything you're saying. And it's not so much saying, I'm going to train you. It's just giving you a couple of tools to say, instead of telling a 2-year-old, which many of us know 2-year-olds are very defiant, they're finding their words, they're in the space of like, I'm autonomous from you, I'm not connected to you anymore. I'm giving her the choices. Instead of, I'm going to shove you in this high chair and force you to eat this, and then you're going to throw the plate, and then I'm upset. It's, would you like to eat this or this? You're giving these options where the child has the voice. But I think there's that level of what can we accomplish immediately when treatment starts. As a behavior analyst, I'm going to show you. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your child. Let me work with your child so you can see it. And then the other piece of, I'm going to build rapport with you. You know your child better than I do. I haven't been around since birth. I don't know your family style or your parenting style, but I can give you some recommendations, and let's try it together. I think there's a level of that rapport component where they need to trust us, but then we need to show them that we can make change pretty rapidly. And then I think this can be a related conversation. There's also a level of parents who are just exhausted and they just want you to come in at work and they don't want to be involved until things are a bit under control, especially with those learners that might engage in more challenging behavior. I'm just tired. I've dealt with tantrums all weekend. When you come in on Monday, please don't ask me to watch. Please don't ask me to jump in. I just need a break. And then you, BCBA and RBT, when you have it under control, bring me in when the time is right.
I have so many thoughts. I'm going to first say our first secret word, though, because that time has come. How about match? MATCH, match. And the reason I chose that is, as Kristen and Nissa were both speaking, so many stories were running through my head. And it has to do with that idea of you have to match what you do to what they need. Because I've always been, I've always been the let me enter softly into your world kind of person, and I can observe, and I can let you show me what you need. I can let you tell me what you need. Kristen, I don't even say 50%. I don't think we're 50-50. We're service providers. That this is their show. We're here to support them and what they need. But I one of my biggest learning lessons was working with a father who was a super executive. Like, he was a CEO. And when I was talking to him about his son, and I was asking him a lot of questions and kind of trying to stay in the back seat, it went nowhere. Absolutely nowhere, because that's not what he wanted from me. He wanted me to come to him with my expertise. He wanted me to look at him and say, this is what you are doing wrong. This is why you are getting this back from him. I mean, that was hard for me. But I did eventually learn, oh, okay, you want this from me. When I'm talking to your wife, I'm going to be the usual Shannon. But when I am talking to you, we're gonna be CEOs together. Uh, so once that happened, everything kind of changed in that dynamic, and I felt like it made a huge difference, which is so opposite of what we usually feel like we're telling people to say. But it goes back to being a behavior analyst. Let's understand this client, their needs, their preferences. Um, and like you were saying, Nissa, so many of the times it is 100%. They are making so many choices. They have limited amount of time in the day. They have a limited amount of energy, and they may want to do what you're asking them to do, but bandwidth, are we even being reasonable? Have we looked at the competing variables?
I think that's
Well,
one of the things that was most impactful in my early career, working with teachers and families. So, teachers, how many things do they have going on, right? Like, it's not the same kind of job as parenting. But in both cases, I really learned you can make the most beautiful behavior plan, do all these, it's completely functionally correct, all of these components. It even has a pretty poster and lovely data collection. And in theory, it should completely work. But if the people implementing it do not have the skills or the bandwidth to do it, it's as good as garbage. Like, it doesn't matter if it's technically correct if it's not going to be implemented and used because the family is barely surviving financially, or any of the millions of reasons that might be hard. I've had families that have very, very low skill, and I've had families who have multiple college degrees for both parents and incredible amounts of income. And the challenges and what needs to be addressed and taught can be very different depending on the family. So even if the child might have I had 2 kids in 2 situations with similar behavior, similar function, what we do to address that might be drastically different in 2 different settings with 2 different families.
So if I were stepping into a parent training session, or if I had a brand new BCBA and I said, here is how you could start, right? Because so much of, I think, also being a provider in a parent training context, it is contingency shaped behavior, right? Like, I am a product of all the families that have shaped me over the 30 years I've been in this field. But I would also say, starting off with a family and saying, what do you love about your family and your life? And then what areas would you like to see changed, or what are challenging? And then finding where those things are that you can make changes, but not addressing those big changes, right? Taking a step back and saying, what's one thing that I can teach you that will improve your quality of life? Even if it's something so silly, like my kids get toothpaste all over the sink. It sets the pace for my whole day. If that one thing changed, my mindset for the whole day would be shifted. So it doesn't have to be this big thing like potty training or the arrival routine is all clean. It can be just one tiny thing where the parents contact, hey, the tip they gave me was successful, and this really helped me. And And I think that circles back to like the, what is it called? The soapbox I've been on lately, which is then making sure that we have consent for that. Because a lot of times I think parent training is a service that's tagged on and we say, your funder requires that we do this. Let's outline all these goals. And parents, I don't think it's all the time, but a lot of times they don't want that, or they don't like the procedures we're doing or the data collection, or maybe the goals, and they're not, their no and their cancellations or their not attendance is somewhat tied to their consent to participate. And so I think making sure that as we go through and choose those pivotal things we're teaching them, that we have their consent and that we're establishing it and checking in on it frequently to make sure that what we're doing is socially valid and it's acceptable to them and they're saying yes, rather than like a passive no.
One of the things that comes to mind as you're talking through that too, Kristen, is, if as a behavior analyst, I want to work with an organization, I don't just do that. I get some OBM training, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that the way organizations run, that you have to understand the systems beyond just how each individual person within that system works. You have to see how the overall system functions in order to make change. And when we talk about parent training, we oftentimes say to BCBAs and RBTs, if you're noticing some family systems issues or some family dynamics that are counterproductive or that are interfering, then that's time to refer, which I absolutely 100% agree. But I also think there's some merit in behavior analysts and even RBTs understanding, at least doing some reading, get yourself some training on family systems dynamics.
Yeah.
So that you know what you're looking at. Because, how many times have we been in a system where we are working with the one parent all the time and that person is implementing or trying to implement, and then maybe the other parent is in and out or a grandparent is in and out. And when that other person is present, everything comes out differently, right? That's beyond our scope in terms of dealing with the family dynamic. But to know that and to then be able to incorporate that sort of information when you are working with those parents, when you are developing your plans of who's going to do what, to me, I have used that sort of information a whole lot, even if it's not that I'm directly addressing that. What do y'all think? Am I pushing people out of their scope with that?
I don't think so. I love a family systems approach. That's where I feel like I learned how to be a good parent trainer, was when I worked with Shane Isley at Blueprints, where their approach, we're behavior analysts, but their approach was firmly rooted in positive behavior support, family systems work, and taking a constructional systemic approach to parent training. And so I think when you take that approach, you see the family as a whole different thing, right? We're not isolated members. We're all interconnected. And I don't think that's outside of the scope at all. And if you have practiced and received training in that way.
Yeah.
Well, we're always looking at the factors that are occurring around behavior, right? What's happening before, what's happening after. I mean, all of those family dynamics and family systems are all interconnected and intertwined as antecedents and consequences to everything. So I think you can't ignore the way that those impact what you're trying to help with.
I think of the book, The Power of Positive Parenting by Glenn Latham. I know it's a little bit, it's an older book, but I remember receiving it. You have on yourself. I know mine, I'm trying to figure out where mine is, but I got that book right when I'd passed, and that, way back in 07, 08, and I would read through it. It would sit on a shelf, and then I gave birth to my oldest in 2009, and I reopened it from my own perspective as a parent. Of like, okay, I've got this newborn, now I'm the parent, and then I put it down, and then I had my second child, so I reopened it every few years. And I just love that concept of like, this whole family unit is the unit that we're supporting, right? If we think about social significance and how we're helping this family, we can't just say, hey, mom, you have to attend for 30 minutes to an hour every single week, because the funder requires it. It's truly that we are trying to support your family and your family's goals as a unit. And some of those goals may align to what we've written as medical necessity. And some may align, like you're saying, Kristen, to just let's get the counter clean toothpaste and the toothpaste marks that show up on the ceiling. And I don't know how that had happened because it happens in my home. And I don't know how brushing our teeth gets toothpaste way up there when you're a little person, but it does. And yes, I'm going to be a happier mom if my day starts without toothpaste in the upper right-hand corner of my mirror.
To wipe it every day, or
How that
mom
happens.
me if it's just a
You know what?
You don't want to go out and play your corner
They're
and wipe
brushing their teeth, guys.
There's that.
They're brushing them.
I was going to say, that is permanent product data collection. You do not know that. They could be just,
That is true.
Yeah. That's what my children are doing.
my middle child is. I swear on my life, she is the middlest middle child ever.
They at least are aware that they should be.
They're doing something with the toothbrush and the toothpaste.
Shape it. It's okay. You can shape it.
Well, Nissa, so something you said resonated with me. I'm in the middle of writing this chapter around parenting for a publication, a book. And so I've been like going back to all of my favorite like parenting books. And I even actually went to my local public library branch and I was just like, I want to see what's here, how I align with it, how I don't. But I went to a good old favorite. And this reminded me so much because I think that a lot of times when we also step into a family system, we are projecting what we think it looks like and what a healthy system looks like. And that's not always the case. So can I read this? It's like so profound. I like.
before you read it, will you say the title since you just.
It's Between Now and Dreams. And it's a fantastic, it's written by Shala, who's a behavior analyst, and then Peggy, she's somehow related tangentially. I think she has a child with autism. But they co-wrote this book over like 20 years and it is so consumable and it's like beautiful in its root and behavior science, but then also just humanity more globally. Like it feels like a warm hug when you read it like that, whereas when I read like Kasdan or I'm like, this is matter of fact, I know what to do. But they talk a lot about like just relationships and all these different things that come from and come into being a parent, but then also being a provider. And so one thing they said is professionals should not think of parents as difficult or just another barrier to work around. A professional doesn't have to share a family's values in order to offer their skills while respecting and deferring to those values. And I feel like that's so profound when we're thinking of like intervening within a family context, that we're not working against the parent or trying to have them do something. They're not a barrier, that we're here to support them and move forward together. And so that really resonated with me. I read it yesterday and was just thought,
It's beautiful. And it's reminding me of something. And I've talked about it, Kristen, whenever I've been filling in for you at live presentations. So I might as well bring it up in front of you and see if you approve. So it took me embarrassingly long to learn this, but once I learned it, I leaned way, way into it. And you guys know that. So my background is not insurance-based services, and so I've probably had a little bit more latitude than BCBAs who are getting paid by insurance. But in working with schools on contracts and working in adult service provision, I finally learned that the client really is the teacher. The client really is the direct service provider in those systems, in group homes and such. And in doing FBAs, I started embedding an ecological assessment. And then over time, I even started replacing FBA when I was called in to do FBA. I'm like, let's do the ecological first. And then if we need an individual FBA, we'll move into that. Because the system variables were so huge. And many times if we were able to address those, we didn't need the FBA. And the things that were making the big difference, and it not only to make a difference in the behavioral issues that I was called for, but it made a difference in the relationship between me and the person I was there to observe. We told them on the front end, we're going to come in and we're going to take data on you. We are. And it's very important that you do everything exactly the way that you normally do it. We understand when we're first there, you're not going to be able to because that's weird to have somebody watching you. We get that, but we're going to come a lot. We're going to be here all through the day. We're going to over-represent. You're going to get comfortable with us, and we're going to show you our data, and we're going to tell it to you before we tell your boss. And what would come out of that would be things like the mop heads are stored behind lock and key. And this is interfering with behavioral issues with your clients because your staff are so focused on how am I going to get this person with a key to the group home? How am I going to clean this floor and prevent this person who likes to eat food off of the floor from getting to it? I'm not allowed to lock doors. So that means one of my staff members has to stand in the doorway. These kinds of things are real impediments. And when you have multiple, in my case, it was adults with intellectual disabilities in that group home who need behavioral supports, and you're pulling two of 4 staff to look for mop heads.
Such a great point, that ecological assessment. I mean, speaking back to my sister, I'm going to make her listen to this episode, but one of the things that we've done, she's been here for 5 days now, is every day before we do anything like, oh, let's go have a drink, let's go to dinner, let's go here. What we've done is we've got 3 older kids. We're going to the park. We're going to the pool. We're going to go do something for the children to wear them out, because when we get to that restaurant and they've been in the car, they're going to lose their mind and we're not going to have a good time. Right. And she was like, I didn't even think about that. And there are a lot of individuals out there that become parents that maybe don't have the experience. They've never babysat. They've never worked with a child. So they just want the child to fit right into their lifestyle. And it's like, wait, if you know children, they have energy to burn, and you can't put them in a high chair at a restaurant, or else you're going to start saying, I'm never taking them out to a restaurant. They are so hard. Well, it's not that you haven't set the environment in a way where they would do well. When kids are tired and they've been in the playground, we live in Texas, so it's been 100 degrees. She was worn out. Most of the time, my niece slept when we went out to dinner these last few days because she was outside in the heat playing in the playground, and then was just wiped. And we had amazingly calm meals. So it's just those small arrangements, Shannon, like you're saying, that reconsider your schedule or in your routine. Why don't you add this little component? It's 10 more minutes. If you're in a rush in the morning, but 10 minutes sitting and reading a book. That means you might have to wake up a little bit earlier, but I promise you there's more bang for your buck in getting through your coffee and getting ready to walk out the door. And then before I turn it over, one more thing that reminded me, Kristen, when you were looking at the text from Shala, I've used I've had RBTs I've worked with who are trainees accruing hours kind of send me messages over the last decade and a half saying, this parent is hard or this parent is difficult, and using pretty negative language about parent. So one of the unrestricted hours assignments that I provide is I'm going to give you an example scenario of an RBT talking about a parent with all of these different words that make the parent difficult and hard to work with. And I want you to rewrite this paragraph looking at the environmental arrangements and rephrasing how you would define this parent and shifting that language. And even giving feedback in the moment saying, so you told me that the mom's really hard and she doesn't want you to, she doesn't like reinforcement. Let's reevaluate that whole statement. There are so many ways that we can talk about that with a less negative connotation.
Ooh, I love that. I do have to do secret word number 2. So how about connotation? How do I do that? Now I have to spell it. CONNOTATION. Connotation.
You in a sentence. That was
Kind of
Perfect.
reminds me a little bit when I was working with schools. I had a first grade classroom. I was asked to come in, and according to the numbers, the teacher it was 45% of the students in the class that needed an individualized behavior program. Okay, well, let's talk about that because we just tier-wise, I just know that that's not true. So if there's that level of struggle happening, there's probably some kind of a systems, classroom management, environmental arrangement. And she was having 5 and 6-year-olds sit in one place for 45 minutes at a time. I mean, it definitely was those kinds of things. But sometimes things that can seem like this child and this child, they're, when really it is something that's behind a lock. They're being asked to do something that's not age appropriate. They haven't been given the right prep or the right tools, or, it can be very simple antecedent kind of interventions that are easily implemented and get good results and get good buy-in with very little effort. So those are, low-hanging fruit, like I think Nissa said earlier.
Kristen and Allison, especially, well, all of you, I didn't mean to leave you out, Nissa. Everybody who's not me in this meeting. What about prioritizing? So I'm the BCBA, and I'm coming in to work with this child and to deliver this parent training, and I'm noticing the things that we're talking about here. This is not an FAQ. I just realized you guys should be asking this. This should be an FAQ. How do I prioritize what I'm going to do with my time? If I see all of this family systems stuff or things that we could do a lot of antecedent control with, or low hanging fruit, as you've described earlier. Plus, I've got these assessments that I need to run and these goals that are coming directly off the assessment. How do I prioritize?
I think this is where we look at, you have to use your kind of instructional design brain, how we talk about instructional design and behavior analysis, right? So what do I see? But then how does that relate to what the parent sees, right? So I may walk in and see, okay, the house is messy. So of course the routine, X, Y, and Z that are stressing the parent out are happening because we can make these ecological changes. So I think when we stack those things and we put them together, then we find where can I find like pivotal things to teach the parent that will maximally affect them, right? So maybe it is that we create a new organization structure for the front door so that, the entry into the house is clean, and just that creating that new, coat hook or whatever, like gets the parent more motivated. They come in, they're yelling less, they're less stressed out. It doesn't, it eliminates some setting events. And so I think when we're looking at what can we change that'll have the biggest bang for the buck? And then how can we tie that to what we already put in a treatment plan? And if we can't, then we're prepared to explain in the treatment plan why we changed to this other parent training goal. Because families change, right? Not every family is going to stay the same in a 6 or 12-month period of time. And I think that as long as we have rationale explaining why we would change something, that's acceptable. But I think it's important to measure both what I see as a clinician and then what is affecting the parents most and what they want to see change.
I liked how you said, the pivotal kind of skills, because we look at that a lot for our clients, right? We know that when they learn to communicate something, that just opens up a whole new world, right? So what kinds of small things are going to open up some floodgates for the parents? And I think even some of that is knowledge-based things. I think once parents get a little bit of a handle on functions of behavior, I've seen that be hugely pivotal, because then they can start to look at everything that's happening with a little bit of a different lens. And maybe that doesn't immediately change any of the things that are happening, but I think sometimes it does help change your response and attitude and frustration and things if you can better understand what's going on. So I think there's, pivotal actions we can take, pivotal things that we can set up, but I think there's also like pivotal knowledge to impart or pivotal initial skills to teach that are going to have like a disproportionate effect on their ability to move forward.
So, okay, can I take this and talk about some of the things that, I'm not trying to sell care coordinator or care companion or parent app. But I think you bring up a really good point, Allison, because one of the things we know from the more global parent training literature is that we do see higher rates of attrition and just like not even starting when we don't incorporate an education piece. Because as a parent, I can tell you right now, if I'm watching Nissa here model how to play with my child, I'm already thinking about, what do I have to make for dinner? I hope Nissa doesn't notice the toothpaste on the counter that's been sitting there for 3 days. My brain's in 50 million directions. And so one of the things that we did when we created the parent training content was really break those behavioral concepts. We have like different categories of content. We have behavioral concepts in ABA, like functions of behavior, or we even have a lesson on prioritization. How do you prioritize what to do? What are your values and how does that align? And then we have like parenting and advocacy, and then a whole values line. And so giving the parents that educational content to listen to on their own time, so that when I show up and talk about functions of behavior, they already have like a baseline idea for what I'm talking about. And within that content, we also have opportunities for self-reflection. So it's not just here's, 10 minutes about functions of behavior. It's here's 10 minutes about functions of behavior. Now think about something that you observed in your child and journal about it. Spend 1 minute journaling, or I narrate because that's how I do it, about what this looked like. So really reflect and apply it to your life, and then bring it to your provider when they come over, so that you can say, hey, we're talking about functions of behavior today. I just realized that I'm letting Lexi put toothpaste on the counter because I'm doing X, Y, and Z, or I can't figure this out, right? And we don't also have a good handle in the literature on what actually quantifies as engagement. A lot of times in publications, I was just reading an article this morning, we're not reporting, doing homework or following up on data collection. We don't have great numbers around what that actually is and what happens and what frequency. So I think if we can start to look at and accept that it's okay that parents consume information differently and need a different process for learning, because we all do, that will be really beneficial to us in how we can construct meaningful experience for them.
And I think what I love about those lessons too is they are specifically targeted toward parents. It's not like RBT content that we're like, oh, you could learn that too. The content is specifically targeted with a parent lens in mind, and also just the format and the application are also very targeted to, okay, this is not your full-time job. You're not getting paid to sit here and do this training. Here on your phone, while you're sitting in the car waiting for pickup, you can have 5 minutes of instructions specifically targeted for you, and you can put it down and pick it back up later. So I think it's very aware of some of the needs, in as much as we know, there's not, like you said, a ton of literature on what is engagement, what, to the best of our knowledge, we're targeting it toward what will be easier and more consumable for parents.
What you guys are talking about is reminding me of the concept of flipped classroom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to sit here and teach you concepts. You can read. So you go read. And then when you come back, we're going to do work, and I'm going to be able to give you, I don't know, some kind of BST type feedback while we're here together. But I am curious about one thing, and this is on our FAQs as well. When you have parents who have a long kind of history of running these sorts of sessions or being a part of these, how do you get them to accept this flip, right? Because come on, we know that sometimes these parent training sessions turn into parent vent sessions, right? And maybe this BCBA coming in to do this parent training is they're really their only opportunity where they get to do this venting. How do you have any tips for how to switch that paradigm around, or what to do or do I even need to switch it? Is that important? Should we keep it?
This is something I've experienced a lot, and I actually see this as it is a privilege to be a safe spot for that parent, where they may not have a lot of people in their environment that they feel comfortable openly talking about the struggles with their child. They want to appear as a strong parent, or they don't want to project anything on their child and make them look like they're more challenging, or we're all challenging, we're humans. What I've done in the past is if I have parents who like to talk about just here's the rundown of everything, word vomit that's happened in 8 days, and I do this in my own life, I'll have a part of our session, hey, the first 5 minutes, let's check in on the week. I'm going to set my phone timer so that I, as the person running this agenda of our time can stay on task. And then we'll move on to our other content. Because I think and then I look at that more systemically, right? So parents need a resource to be able to talk about their life and talk about their child. So how can I work with this parent and have them identify ways that they can find other avenues, whether that's, talking to a counselor or making other friends with parents who have similar kids to them. How can I help that parent to be making choices to have those additional resources? So kind of those two ways of how I do it, topographically letting them doing it, and then systemically finding alternatives for them.
I agree a lot with that sentiment. I think that, again, when I look at it, I'm in the insurance funded world. There's the parent training goals where it's like, okay, and again, I think parent training is the wrong term. I think parent engagement is a better term. Like the parents that I work with closely, sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's a Zoom session, sometimes it's an email, and just a check-in. And I think having them respond consistently means they're engaged.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked past with parents who just didn't respond at all. It was just, I'm too busy to even read your email and then drop off and pick up. And if you catch me and walk out to the car with me, that's the conversation we're having. So in this virtual world, anytime I can get a parent to actually stay on the line with me for more than 15 minutes, which is one billable unit, then I think that we've built rapport. They value a little bit of what I'm communicating. We're having a conversation. But then even further, just really when they are coming to me and sharing things, like I've had a mom call just to talk about her fear. We have a learner who elopes, and he was found, 800 meters away from home recently, and the RBT found him. It was a 30-minute conversation of, okay, this is a treatment plan you wrote, but now we have a whole new fear unlocked, and we need to reevaluate. We need to move our focus from conversation skills to stranger danger, safety, and leaving the environment without an adult. Right. So all of a sudden I'd submitted to insurance a treatment plan that needed to be reevaluated because, in all honesty, we need to work about conversations when he was leaving the house alone, unsupervised. That is the highest priority. But in addition to just listening to this parent who was stressed, it's also, do you have a neighbor that is a couple of streets down, a couple of houses down who you can just check in on? And what about other kiddos in the area that we can get him walking over to see? And that's setting up the social environment to have them feel supported, but also providing ways to say, look, I'm hearing you vent, but I'm going to bring it always back to what's most important for your family and your child, because that's the capacity that I can support with.
Making that pivot when you need to pivot too, right? I mean, you revise that plan based on this information. I think that's important to note as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, we are coming towards the end of our time together. I am just dying to know, Kristen, are you going to take on this definition of parent engagement thing?
What is the definition of? It's so. I don't have a short answer for that. I think we need one. I think this is we're very lucky to be able to work at CentralReach where we have the opportunity to start looking at that and quantifying what does that look like. And so I could see that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I think it's just so hard because, engagement for me might look so small, but like it took such a lift to get there. It's hard. There's so many other things that go into it. Maybe that could be a joint project with all of us.
I'm in, I love that. I love when we find those sorts of things. Because I did a deep dive into like telehealth therapy at the beginning of COVID and really going through the literature with a fine-tooth comb. And even though there might be a large body, when you actually start reading every single one of those studies and not just reading them, but making your matrix and you're writing down what's in this one, what's not, there's so many places where we are working on some assumptions that have truly not been defined. There's still so much of that in our field. So, yeah, let's define engagement.
Feels like there's a whole body of research in other related fields that we could.
Yes.
Well, and the other thing that I think that I found to be really and I don't think this is startling to anyone. We know this, but when I actually started writing down line by line every study what their population was, and Kristen knows that I bring this up every single time we have a conversation. Like, don't forget what? Most of our study is on white middle class moms who live within a certain driving distance of a university program. So I guess we can kind of, I would love some round robin information about that. What if you're working with families who aren't responding to the curriculum that you're using, the language that is in it, the values that are underlying it? What do you suggest to BCBAs who are dealing with that?
I think this moves to that cultural component, right? We've got dual income families. We've got families who are multiple jobs out of the home. We've got families who've got other family members who serve as caregivers who maybe don't even speak English, which is the majority of the languages that we provide services in here in the United States. So I think that there's a consideration component. I have a family member, for example, where my aunt is the primary caregiver. So parent training is delivered to my aunt, but she doesn't speak English very well. And it's very difficult for the BCBA to communicate with her. And one of the things I've done with other families where English is a second language is always send an email in writing following the parent training. With grandmother today, here's what we discussed, mom and dad. If you wouldn't mind translating this to grandmother, or if we can talk about this with you present. And again, in this scenario, the parents were both out of the home working while grandmother was present. And, grandmother wasn't going to hop on a Zoom to talk about it. So there were accommodations where mom could come home once every 6 months. This mom that I worked with was an ER doctor. She was just not available. So once every 6 months, she could come home where we could do collaboration, parent training, translation. But for the most part, it had to be an email that was sent, following up, and then hoping that mom would speak to grandmother and communicate all of the things that we had talked about or that I had modeled, but wasn't able to communicate without a translator. And there's a lot of that needs to be considered with the number of individuals that we serve. And there will not always be a translator available. And some organizations don't have them. Maybe families can't afford them. We have to find a way to communicate this engagement. Again, I don't want to call it parent training because it's really difficult to train a family, one who has English as a second language, and then two parents that might not even be present, or maybe it's one parent,
or agree, or are on the same page, or have the same cultural priorities, and think how isolating it would be to be a primary caregiver of a child with a disability and also not be able to participate in the primary language of the service providers that you're working with. We talked a little bit about what about when parents just want to vent for a little bit. What if they can't? What if there is no outlet for which I think is what makes defining engagement really difficult too, because what does that look like? What kind of access do they have? I had a student in one of my classes when I was a special education teacher that they did not have in their home transportation that could take the wheelchair anywhere. So the only opportunity that this child had to go anywhere was on the bus to school, basically. And what is that treatment plan and what's socially significant in that family is very different when they can't even go in the community, right? They just don't have the ability to do that. So I think really back to that environmental analysis, systems analysis, you've got to start where they are and see what can open up doors, what is a pivotal thing for this particular family, and it's going to be really different.
One of the things that is really different now than what we had a year ago or 6 months ago is those AI translation tools. They are really, really good now. And so I have hope that for that sort of thing, it's not even going to be you typing in what they said and them typing, and getting and having to read it. We can now do it by voice, and it's just going to get better and better and better. So I have hope for that. What I am more concerned with is when we have assumptions about what's important, when the curriculum is built around, certain ideas, even basic ones like assent, right? We are built on, and we market ourselves that we're an assent-based curriculum. We at CentralReach build assent-based learning tools, but that can be a cultural obstacle for some families who are not of a cultural background that says that children should be able to make those kinds of decisions.
So
Help me.
as I'm writing this book chapter, I've spent so much time thinking about this because walking into a house and telling a parent, you need to incorporate assent into your parenting is, again, like I don't want to be the one who's forcing my kids to, are you saying that I don't already, So one of the ways that I've framed it in looking at the research and in all my experience, because, my whole history in the field of ABA is assent-based, whether that was working directly with children or in parent training. I've just been a unicorn in how I've sought out and been, stumbled into opportunities with those organizations. I think what we need to do is always go back to what is valuable to the family. How then, because, a family is, I love this analogy. I hope you guys do too. I equated it to, it is a note in a symphony. So it's not just how assent fits in with the family. How does assent fit in with then the extended family? How does assent fit in with all the communities in which this family and context in which this family participates, right? So what does that look like? What even is that culture? And then this is where we look at what are the cultural risks and what are the cultural supports? So if I have a learner who withdraws assent, when that's not honored, that learner escalates. And then I'm going to teach that learner, yes, your assent, we're not going to teach you anything but to withdraw assent. And then you go in the community, you withdraw assent and you escalate. What position of risk does that put you in if you are an 18-year-old boy, right? It's not going to be a good place. There's other things I need to teach. And so I think doing that kind of analysis where we're remembering that there are so many variables in a person's life and we need to zoom in for the family, but we also have to zoom out and understand the big cultural risks and supports and how we can integrate that. And assent in a family, I think it looks different. Truly, I think it looks different for every family. And I think that's okay. I'm not going to step in and say every family needs to look this way because but I think it really is finding out what that looks like for a family and then how we tie that to what's valuable to them and important to them and their community more broadly.
That was amazing. Thank you, Kristen. I think we can let that be the last word. I don't think we can improve upon it, other than to give the last secret word, which will make it assent, ASSENT. Thank you, guys. This has been so much fun. I could do this again and again and again. Really appreciate it. So that is our episode for today. I hope that we've given you some real and meaningful tools to apply in your parent training journeys out there. But give us some feedback. Let us know if you like this format, if you'd like more of this, or you want a deeper dive on something. We love your feedback. But until then, we'll see you next time on the Behavioral View.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Behavioral View.